Hey, hello everyone. Just want to talk to you about the next unit of work we're going to do, which is on linear motion. Now that starts this week, which will be the Tuesday afternoon lesson. Now I won't be with you until the following week, but it's good to get started because we've got some pracs coming up next week, and I thought we'd get started on this stuff. Now this is linear motion, so the distinction is you'll be doing non-linear motion. In other words, it'll be in two different planes or two different dimensions, but that's for year 12, so that'll be in term 4 later in the year. So today in grade 11 we're doing linear motion, so it's either linear as in horizontal, or we can look at vertical. So we'll be talking about vertical motion, and in week 6 we'll be doing some experiments on vertical motion. But before we do, let's just get this sorted out. The first topic, this is out of our physics book, Unit 1 and 2, Chapter 10.1, page 272. Now, I'm just going to go through a couple of these points with you. They're all pretty straightforward. I'm going to talk about vectors and scalars, which is this 10.1. Now, those of you, some of you will be doing this in maths, so you have a slightly different interpretation of the way we do our work in physics. The physics and maths both are very much the same, but there's certain of the way we set it out is a little bit different. It makes no difference, but I'm just following the syllabus exactly. The word vector is it's a Latin word which means to carry. So in our case, in terms of linear motion, a vector is a physical quantity that carries information, other information besides the size of it. So, for instance, when I say a 10 Newton force, now there's the magnitude, but the vector talks about a direction as well. So I might say it's a 10 Newton force that way. So if I had an object and I gave it a 10 Newton push, well, the force would be in that direction. So I would say the force as a vector quantity is 10 newtons, that's the magnitude part, and then the direction is that way. Okay, so basically a vector is just a physical quantity like mass and temperature and stuff like that, but a vector is a physical quantity that has both magnitude and direction. So if you'd like to note that vector has magnitude and direction. Okay, so that's in the text written like that. Now some examples of that will be force, I just did that one, weight, which is a form of force anyway, but you could have a thing you might have learned in grade 10 in the motion unit there, the physics unit, displacement. Now you'll also have things like acceleration and velocity. Now they're the main ones that we're doing for this unit of work, just those. Force, displacement, acceleration, velocity. Later in grade 12 we'll be looking at some more of these. There's things like electric field strength and just some words to do with magnetic fields and electric fields and so on. So that's the vector. A scalar, S-C-A-L-A-R, is just a magnitude only. So an example might be mass. So when you talk about the mass of an object, you'll say this has got a mass of, maybe 100 grams, and that's all. It's not 100 grams that way or that way, it's just 100 grams. The temperature of something, if you measure the temperature, it's 50 degrees C. It's not 50 degrees that way or anything like that. So some examples here would be mass, temperature. Now the one that is the confusing one is in grade 10 you would have learnt distance. Now that's actually a scalar quantity. So when you talk about the distance, when you say it's 500 meters to the shop, you just say that's how far it took to get there. If you're talking about displacement, you'll be talking about not only the difference between the starting position and the final position, but also which direction you headed. Okay, so for you, all you have to be familiar with is the term vector, the term scalar, and a few examples of each as they apply to linear motion. Okay, so that's the first one. Just on vectors, it's a funny word. You often hear, those of you doing biology, you might do a unit on disease, and they often talk about mosquitoes being the vector for malaria. Now there's a particular type of mosquito called Anopheles, and it carries the disease, the malaria disease, if you like. So it's called the vector. So the Anopheles mosquito is the vector for a disease. Okay, just because it means to carry. Okay, now the second thing I want to talk about is this thing called coordinate, ORD, coordinate systems. Now, when we talk about directions, you'll meet this in maths as well. Now you've talked about your number line ever since you were, in primary school. You would have had a number line that went something like this. It started maybe with 0 in the middle, and you said this was positive and this was negative. So you might have had 2, 4, 6, 8, and then -2, -4, -6, and so on. So one way you can specify the directions for vectors is with a coordinate system that is just a horizontal system, which is a positive and negative number line. Now, if you're talking about forces, if you said a force of, say we said a force of 20 newtons, well, it has to be a direction as well, because force is a vector. So you could say plus 20 newtons, and so that would be in the positive direction, so it would be a push of 20 newtons that way. Or you could say F equals 20 newtons east, for instance. Okay, because let's imagine that's the easterly direction, so that could be east, and this could be west. So you can talk about east and west, or positive and negative. Now in grade 12, when we're talking about Earth's gravity, east and westerly directions becomes more important. But that's one system. Now of course, if you were talking about north and south, you'd have a vertical system as well. Okay, now that's one coordinate system, which is just the positive, negative, or east-west system. When it comes to acceleration due to gravity, which is coming up probably in week 6, maybe, yeah, you'll be doing your pracs in week 6. Now, in the vertical direction, now you could always call that positive, 0, and negative. Okay, so say for instance you dropped a ball such as this, and this is what you'll be doing in your prac. You'll be dropping a ball, it'll be heading in the negative direction. So you might say the velocity is negative 20 meters per second. Okay, now I'll explain the use of these terms like that. To you, that might be just meters per second. Okay, negative just means it's going down. Or if it's going up, you'd say, so that's down, up might be V equals, plus whatever you like, 15 meters per second. The positive just means it's going up. Now you could also use, up and down, but we generally use positives and negatives. Now the other one, I might as well mention this while we're at it. Look, I'll just get rid of this. If you think about acceleration due to gravity, I'll put here due to gravity. Now, you learned about this in grade 10, and you know that gravity pulls an object down, because we consider the Earth to be here, and the Earth pulls objects down towards it. Now, if you had a ball and you let it go, it would start to get faster in that direction. So its velocity would be 0 to start with, but its velocity after a second or so might be 10 meters per second. I'll do it like that, or meters per second, like that. So you could either say it's 10 meters per second down, or just a negative 10 meters per second. Now the ball starts at V equals 0, but its magnitude is getting bigger, so it's accelerating, and it's in the downward direction. Now that acceleration due to gravity we will call G. We give it a special name, G, and if you remember back to grade 10, it was just negative 9.8 meters. You might have written it like this, meters per second, or meters second to the negative 2. Now I'll be talking about that in section 3. Okay, so they're the main points. All I want to do was to talk about the idea of vectors, which you've done, and the coordinate system, horizontal and the vertical one. You are now able to do these CYL questions on page 277. So I'll leave that with you, and we're done. I'll get ready and I'll do 10.2 next. So that's it.